eye contact and hesitate to join conversations and feel uncomfortable in group activities. And they ask us not only to provide interventions for their children, but also teach them practical strategies they can use at home. That's exactly why we created today's parent workshop series. And today, in our second session, we'll focus on managing social anxiety for children ages 5 to 12. For those who are new to Cogleap, let me introduce our company briefly. So Cogleap is dedicated to helping children with ASD, ADHD, and other developmental challenges thrive. Our parent company, Cognitive Leap, which develops our core technologies, was founded in Los Angeles in 2015. Our operational subsidiary launched 3 years ago has already supported thousands of families. You can see the picture of our company in Irvine. We provide both clinical and non-clinical services to support children and their families. Our clinical services include ABA therapy, which is a one-on-one support to improve behavior, learning, and independence for children with ASD or ADHD. And our non-clinical services include VCAT, which is virtual classroom attention tracker, and HFS, which is whole focus system, and move and connect social group classes. So all of those are tailored to kids with special needs. For today's session, we'll begin with Dr. Knapp's presentation, followed by a Q&A session. We've selected several questions submitted by our parents during registration, and we also encourage every parent to raise your questions during the whole presentation. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat, and we'll address as many as we can afterwards. So please pay attention. Now, let's move on to our highlight of today's workshop. It is my great honor to introduce our expert, Dr. Knapp, today. So Dr. Knapp is a senior clinical psychologist at specializing autism, ADHD, and behavior issues. So he's a board-certified behavior analyst, doctoral, and registered play therapist supervisor. He has served as a subject matter expert for the California Board of Psychology and the author of Parenting a Child with Autism Spectrum Disorder. Thank you, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Albert. Dr. Albert, it's your floor.
Thank you, Fiona. I appreciate the introduction. And thank you, parents, for coming this evening. As Fiona said, if you have any questions, you can drop them into the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them toward the end. If you have a question, though, about something I just said that you need answered in that moment to understand what I said, you can raise your hand and unmute and ask that question if it's directly related to what I'm trying to share about. All right, you can advance the slide. So today we're going to talk about managing social anxiety in 5 to 12-year-olds. So we're going to talk about what it looks like in children, how it can impact friendships in school, how you can support your child. We're going to talk about evidence-based interventions that can be helpful, and then essentially when to recognize when professional intervention or support would be needed. So what is social anxiety? So essentially, social anxiety is a mental disorder, and it essentially is intense fear of being judged, embarrassed, or rejected in social situations. And this can present in many different ways for different children. You may see it in class, them not wanting to speak up. You may see them like hesitant to meet new peers in social settings, whether it be a park, the classroom, a playground, like an indoor gym. You may see it them not wanting to join games or play activities of other children. Or you may see it if they're the center of attention. So if they were going to give a presentation at school, like show and tell, or as they get a little bit older and they have to present on something, they may get very, very nervous and anxious when they have to give a presentation. For example, someone with social anxiety wouldn't do what I'm doing right now. They would not want to be in front of a whole Zoom full of people and talk about topics. Something that I would like to point out is that anxiety does not equal shyness. Being shy is normal. Many people are shy, and some people are more shy than others. In order for shyness to kind of transfer over to the threshold of anxiety, it really has to cause impairment in functioning. It has to prevent the child from doing something that they need to be able to do, not just being shy and not wanting to do something or wanting their parent next to them when they're trying to do something. So why is this age so important? Why are we focusing on the 5 to 12 year olds? This is a very crucial age for social development. The majority of our social being gets developed during this time frame. This is when children first start to learn about friendships. At age 5, most children, at least in California, are now in some sort of formalized school setting. And for some, it may be the very first time they're exposed to peers on a routine basis. There also is the chance for them to develop group play skills. So instead of playing individually or doing what's called parallel play, where they play their own activity next to another peer, by the time they reach at least age 5, group play becomes more common, where a group of kids would be playing together, doing the same thing, doing the same activity. This is where team sports can start to take place, soccer, t-ball, um, things of that nature. Also, you start to see more classroom participation during this age range. This is when teachers would call on kids to do things in the classroom. Um, Not maybe they'll be a helper, maybe they'll read part of a story, maybe they'll demonstrate how to solve a math problem. But there definitely is a lot more participation in the classroom setting during this age range, which helps social development. And then this is also where a lot of children start to learn how to really regulate their emotions. They have to spend a good chunk of their day outside of the home, at a school, where they get exposed to not only lots of different individuals, but different things that may upset them, things that make them happy, things that stress them out. And they have to kind of learn how to navigate that and how to get through those emotional regulation sorry, the emotional regulation of their emotions. They have to figure out how to manage those things. And then essentially, what we want to be on the lookout for is when we start to see avoidance patterns where a child does not want to do something more than once, and they keep avoiding wanting to do certain things. Not wanting to do something once is not anxiety, but not wanting to do the same thing over and over and over again could be anxiety. So it's really important that we look for these avoidance patterns in this age group because that will give us some clues on what we can do to help them. So there are essentially 3 classes of signs in social anxiety. The first one we're going to talk about is emotional signs. Um, the biggest one is fear of embarrassment. Individuals with social anxiety don't want to do anything that could embarrass them or be like the center of attention where people would judge them or look at them or potentially put them in the spotlight where they could do something that would be embarrassing. You also will see worrying before social events. So prior to going to school or a birthday party or even the park, if you pull up to the park and there's a lot of kids playing on the playground, that is where you might see some worrying happening prior to the event starting. Another emotional sign that could be common in social anxiety is perfectionism, wanting to really do something so perfect that because you won't be judged harshly if you do it perfect. And you start to see perfectionism start to form, and that's going to cause emotional distress. And that's a common sign of social anxiety. As a little picture says, there's no fun in perfection. It is a very stressful thing to make things perfect. Even though the kid may be very proud of themselves, for doing something very nice and making it look really good, it's not a fun way to be because it's very cognitive taxing for them. It's very challenging for them to do that. So we want to be mindful that if we have a lot of professionalism going on, that could be a sign of social anxiety. Um, so the second category of some common signs is behavioral signs or things that you can observe, look out for. So one big one is avoiding play dates. This can include playmates with like cousins and like close family friends that they used to enjoy playing with. It doesn't always have to be brand new play dates. So avoiding of any play dates is a common sign of social anxiety. Not participating in class is another sign of anxiety, or dreading the day that you're the class leader, essentially in class, could be another behavioral sign. Um, Not wanting to help or be like the teacher's pet, not the teacher's pet, sorry, like not being like helpful in the classroom could be a behavioral sign. They don't want to like hand out the papers. They don't want to go get the different, materials that are needed. Also, you can see some clinging to parents, like we see in this little dog here, like clinging to his human. So that is a very common sign for social anxiety, is really wanting to be next to and like attached to a parent figure. And then another behavioral sign would be any sort of refusal of activities. Um, if they are not wanting to do activities, especially activities they used to like before, that could be a sign of social anxiety. And then the last category of common signs are physical signs. So this includes stomach aches and other like gastrointestinal sort of things. Like it might be butterflies in the stomach. It's not common, but not common to vomit or to have, but is a little bit more common to have nausea, like feeling unwell in your tummy. That's a common sign of social anxiety. Headaches is another common sign for social anxiety. Any sort of crying, not only before school, but crying before any social activity or event could be a physical sign of anxiety. And then oftentimes kids with social anxiety might have nightmares, usually nightmares about not doing well enough, being judged harshly, or having nightmares of everyone laughing at them, or thinking they're not doing something right, or they're not cool. So asking about the content of nightmares could help figure out what is going on. And this does look a little bit different when different age groups. In the younger age group, social anxiety is going to look a little bit different than in the older age group. And I have it broken down into two groups, 5 to 7 and 8 to 12. So for a 5 to 7 group, hiding behind parents, one of the most common things. They're in between your legs, they're hanging on to your clothes, they're peeking around you if they're trying to like see what's going on. They don't really want to join play. They'd rather play by themselves. They have a really hard time joining in when others are playing, or if others want to play with them, they don't want to play with them. And then when they're in a group setting, they tend to just follow along and they're quiet. They're not adding more to the group. They're sitting there, they might be playing the board game or whatnot, but they're really struggling to be fully engaged and fully present like the other children. So they'll be quiet in the group. For older individuals, you'll see it a little bit differently. So they're kind of over the clinging. They're not really having trouble playing anymore, but they do not like any sort of presentation at school or having to talk in front of a class of people. That is not enjoyable. That would also include having to stand up, like if they do like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or some other sort of extracurricular activity that involves talking and getting in front of other people. That may not be something that they would like to do. So there'll be some avoidance, maybe some sports that they used to play or clubs they used to be a part of. They no longer want to go to those things, or they don't want to try them out. So they may love to play soccer at home in the backyard or at the park with maybe their family, but they don't want to join a soccer team. That's too anxiety provoking for them. And then they start to say things like they worry about what other people will think of them, or they'll worry about what people will say to them. Or if someone laughed at them or made fun of them once, they overgeneralize that to all peers, that everyone's going to make fun of them, everyone's going to laugh at them. So that's something that can happen as well. So with little anxiety, we have something that's called the anxiety cycle. And the anxiety cycle is essentially a cycle that keeps anxiety from keeps it multiplying and keeps it active for the individual. So if we start at the top of the cycle with worry or panic, so essentially the individual feels worry or feels panic. So what do? They avoid, so they go to avoidance. They avoid whatever's making them worry or panic because when you avoid that, you then feel temporary relief. The behaviorism, we call it the behavior trap. So you're essentially reinforcing your worry and panic by avoiding it. I feel worry or panic, I avoid it, I feel better. So great, awesome. But then what happens is the worry or panic comes back because the stressful event comes back. So now worry, panic comes back, and now the individual doesn't feel like they have confidence in their ability to cope with the stressful situation because now they're feeling it again. So they're like, so what do? They go right back to avoidance. So they're like, I can't cope with this. This is too upsetting and stressful. I have too much worry and panic. Now I'm back to avoidance again. So it becomes this like a self-fulfilling prophecy or a cycle that keeps on going, with avoidance really being the driving force. This avoidance piece here keeps the anxiety relevant for the child. And the avoidance piece is where like the intervention takes place. The intervention takes place by stopping the avoidance essentially, and we'll get into that, and then teaching the coping. So those are the two main treatment interventions, and they're delivered in different ways. We'll talk a little later, but we reduce avoidance and we increase teaching of coping skills. So everything's fine, right? Everything's on fire, everything's fine. Um, very well-meaning adults, parents, teachers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, older siblings, cousins, they all have a typical response pattern, which is very well intended. They really are trying to help their child, and doing these things will give your child temporary relief. So you, as the parent or the caregiver, would be like, okay, my child's not stressed out, my nephew's not stressed out, like you feel happy about that, so you keep doing it. But unfortunately, these things would definitely increase the avoidance and then keep the anxiety from happening. So these include letting the child skip activities. So the child goes, I don't want to go to this, I don't want to go to that. And you let them skip. They feel better because they're not anxious anymore. And you're like, oh, cool, I just helped them out, but you essentially reinforce the avoidance. Speaking for the child. So someone asks the child the question, and the other person that's there, an older child, an adult, they respond for the child. Well, the child's learning, oh, I don't need to talk. So and so will talk for me. They'll let them know what's going on. So you're reinforcing the quietness by speaking up for the child. It would be better to maybe rephrase the question or maybe encourage a shorter response instead of a full sentence, but you definitely don't want to speak for the child. Avoidance of social events. So, you're supposed to go to someone's birthday party and the kid doesn't want to go, and you're like, all right, we just won't go to that event. We'll go do something else. So you avoid the stressful situation altogether. Again, that's just going to reinforce the avoidance. And then reassuring excessively. So sometimes with an anxious child, if we give lots of feedback that they're doing things correctly, we're creating a new problem. Now, telling them over and over and over again that everything's fine, now they need to hear that to keep their worry or anxiety down. So we took one problem and we made a new one. So while we'll talk about reinforcing their attempts at being social, I will talk about when to give appropriate praise. We want to be mindful that we can't do it all of the time because then we create a different monster. Now we created someone that relies on the constant reassurance, or the worry and the anxiety creeps up again. So all of these things, while very well intended, definitely reinforce the avoidance, which keeps the anxiety cycle going. So what can we actually do to be helpful to children? what does Mr. Helpful Hippo want us to do? So there's a couple of things we'll talk about today. So these are gradual exposure is a research-supported strategy that works really well. Teaching coping skills is another thing that works very well in working with social anxiety. Social skill building through social skill groups is another research-supported strategy or intervention. There are parent coaching models that exist to help with social anxiety. And then the use of positive reinforcement is something that can help with social anxiety. And we'll get into all of these in the next couple of slides. So the first thing we're going to talk about is gradual exposure. So what this is, it's having kids face their fears one step at a time instead of avoiding them. So what we would typically do is we would figure out what they're anxious about, and we would have them figure out, like, we would draw like a staircase or like a ladder, and we put the most anxious thing at the top of the staircase, top of the ladder. And then each rung of the ladder or each step of the staircase down, we put something that's slightly less anxiety provoking until we get to the bottom of the ladder, bottom of the staircase. And then at that point, we work on exposing them to that rung, that step, the least stressful activity first until they're not anxious over that. And then we go to the next step. And that repeated gradual exposure really helps the individual not feel anxiety anymore. What they learn is what I think is going to happen, this terrible, horrible, terrible thing that I think is going to happen is not going to happen. And with the gradual exposure that happens over and over again, they learn, oh, what I'm worried about is not to be something to be worried about at all, because it's all in my head. It's not actually reality. And the repeated exposure helps with that. So a very simple hierarchy I put on the slide here for you guys to see to get a sense for it is first you say hi to one peer. Then once you master that step, you start to ask a question in class. And maybe you ask a question in class that is like your favorite class or a subject you're better at. We're not going to ask you to ask a question in a subject you're not good at. And then potentially maybe you go on a small play date, maybe just an hour at a time, maybe with one peer, potentially a peer that you get along with better than others. And then like maybe the last step would be you go to a group activity, like a birthday party or like a team sport again, or a club, and you do something that'd be more of a group activity. The big key here with gradual exposure is all of the little small wins, all of those repeated successful gradual exposures helps build confidence in the individual. And they learn that what they're anxious over is not as scary and upsetting as they have it in their head. Alrighty. The next thing to do is to help them regulate their anxiety through teaching coping skills. One of the easiest things to teach anyone to do is deep breathing. And it's one of the things that really helps with regulating your physical body, which in turn calms down your thoughts and helps you focus and attend to like the here and now. I thought we could all do a quick little deep breathing exercise today. So on the right-hand side, you're going to see like a triangle appear, turn into, yes, thank you for the cursor. You're going to see this graphic kind of go in and out for breathing in and breathing out. So in a moment, get ready to breathe in together. And then out and do it 3 times in total. 2 more times. Hopefully, just in these 15 to 20 seconds, where we all just took a little moment to do some deep breaths, you feel a little bit lighter, not lightheaded, but a little bit lighter in your body. Your heart rate may have gone down a little bit. You feel a little bit more relaxed in your chair. Imagine if you're truly anxious and you did that. You got a little bit of relief now, hopefully relatively calm, sitting in a webinar, and you felt a little bit of relief. Imagine if you were highly activated, how much relief you would feel. What's great about deep breathing too is you can change how you do it with different age groups. Um, for children, younger children, probably 8 and below, I like them to make like a bubble with their hand. So instead of visually seeing something on a screen, they breathe in and breathe out with their hand. And you can change it to how much breath they can actually take in. Um, you can also do it with finger tapping, where you tap and hold and then release the breath. And you can kind of do that for this, the right speed, nice and slow. Um, the key is to do deep breaths where you feel your stomach move up and down, definitely your diaphragm, but that's a big word for young kids. So you see your belly or stomach go in and out. That's how you know you did a deep enough breath. And you always want to do at least 3, sometimes up to about 5 to really get the feelings out and the regulation to happen. Another really helpful coping skill is positive self-talk. I don't know if any of you guys have ever tried positive self-talk, but it really is very powerful. Something really simple as "I can do it" is a very simple self-talk statement that all kids can do. Um, One of the videos I like to watch actually about positive self-talk is I'm a snowboarder, so I love to watch young kids learning how to snowboard, and they'll mic the kids up, and oftentimes they'll fall and they'll go, "Oh man, but I can do this. I know how to turn," or "I can try again." And I love to hear their positive self-talk when they do that. So kids can do it. It's very easy to do. It doesn't need to be very long. And um, they can do it in their head. They don't even have to say it out loud. But that's definitely something that could really help kind of reduce anxiety by having some positive self-talk. For body relaxation, what it means here is essentially muscle relaxation. There are lots of videos on YouTube that can be done for this, and you can search like kids muscle relaxation and have them walk you through it. But essentially, it's going to be a facilitator that's going to ask you to clench and unclench your body muscles and go throughout your whole body. There's short ones that only last 2 or 3 minutes. There are long ones that can last up to 15 minutes. And essentially, what you want is it just takes a moment to feel your muscles tense and release, and it helps get out anxious feelings doing that. And then, similar to self talk, visualizing success or visualizing the desired outcome can be very powerful. You can also do it through like a guided meditation where you have kids walk them through them doing something successful. Kids have what's called magical thinking, where they can actually resolve conflicts without actually doing them, but thinking about the solution in their head and kind of rehearsing through it. Unfortunately, we lose that ability as adults, but as children, it's something that's really powerful that can be used where they're able to walk through what they need to get done and be successful at that. So another way to work on social skills is to actually directly teach them and to build them. A lot of times, what with anxious children, it's not that they don't have the ability to do it, like someone that maybe is diagnosed with autism. Potentially, they lack the practice. They don't do it enough, so they're not what we call socially fluent. They're not able to do it well enough to be socially successful. So we need to give them the time, the practice essentially. So what does that look like? We help them start up conversations. We can give them conversation starters and give them ideas of things to talk about. So before you maybe send them off to the park, if you notice another kid wearing a shirt that you think your kid would like, they're into Pokemon and there's another Pokemon shirt, you can say, "Oh, look, that person has Pikachu on their shirt. I bet you they like Pokemon. Why don't you ask them if Pikachu is their favorite Pokemon?" And that's the way to start a conversation on the playground. Um, you can have them join a group. If you have friends that have children around the same age, that's a safe peer group. Let your friend know, hey, my kid's having some trouble playing with others. Could we plan a little play date where we can do something like my kid loves Legos. Can your kid come over and play Legos with my kid to help them join with another person? And hopefully they'll say yes, and they can practice joining in with other kids to feel more successful doing that. Taking turns. So doing even a board game is a really easy way to take turns. And I love using board games to teach turn taking because it's structured. It's very clear when your turn is, when your turn is not. And there's usually kid board games are usually only about 20 minutes, so they're not really long. And an added bonus, you get to work on being a good sport and a good loser if you're winning or losing. So you get a little bonus back from teaching in there. But essentially, helping them practice turn-taking skills would help with building social skills that would be needed to reduce any social anxiety. And then helping with reading social cues is also a great social skill that can be done. A really great way to do this is in any children's book. Once you read a story, you can look at the pictures that are on the page and ask what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and what the person in the story might do next. And that is a good, really easy way to help teach social cues because there's a visual, and if they're not right, there's no harm, no foul. It's not a real person. You could say, that's not quite right. Like, let's look at their eyes, or let's look at their body language, or let's look at, the ball that's, they dropped their ice cream cone and the ice cream's on the ground. So I don't think that they're happy about that. Because you have that visual, you're able to help them come to the right answer and you would take all the time you need. So there's no social pressure when you're doing it in a story. And then the last thing to do is role playing at home can really help. If you happen to have another child or a niece or a nephew, a cousin that is around the same age or a little bit older and they're willing to do it, that would be great because they can practice with another peer. It'll just feel a little bit more natural. But if you don't, practicing with an adult is perfectly acceptable. If they were in any sort of therapy or intervention for social skills, an adult would be role playing with them. So doing that at home with them is also a viable way to help teach social skills. Something to keep in mind is you want to coach them through what to do, but not rescue. So the little graphic, SpongeBob is telling Gary, you know, to climb over the wall and to, well, I guess punch the punching bag with his eyes, but he's not doing it for him. SpongeBob is not actually making Gary do the activity, but he is kind of teaching him along. He's coaching him along, giving him encouragement. So you want to support them doing the activity instead of reinforcing the avoidance. So don't say things like, oh, don't worry, we don't have to go to that birthday party. Say, I know it's hard to go to the party, but I believe you can try. Or, we're not going to avoid the party, but we're going to go for at least 30 minutes. I know that you can get through 30 minutes of a birthday party. So you want to give them opportunities to practice. You want to praise their effort over their outcome. I'm so happy that you went. Even if they went and they clutched you the whole time and didn't engage in any activities, I am so happy you went to the party. Because again, that is one step closer to really facing the fear. They didn't avoid the party altogether. So when you're coaching, you want to really focus on what was the effort that was put in and reinforce and praise the effort and not get hung up on, oh man, my kid was only there for 20 minutes. That's the outcome. Don't focus on the outcome. Focus on the effort. And if you focus on the effort, the outcome will come later. So you want to phrase any kind of brave behavior, which is essentially for social anxiety, is approach behaviors. So anything that the child does that gets them closer to doing the desired behavior. Like, I noticed you said hi to a friend today. Wow, that was a really brave question to ask. I'm so happy you played next to your classmates today. So these are all things that would get them closer to not feeling socially anxious. So these are the things that you wanted to talk about and praise. To help with some engagement, I was hoping that we would have someone that would like to try a statement, a short praise statement that they can give someone that was anxious, socially anxious. Do we have a volunteer that would like to give one? Fiona, would you be a brave person to break the ice for me?
Okay.
Thank you.
So I noticed you said hello today.
Right, so that's, can you think of a new one, like a different one, like something that a socially anxious parent, sorry, something that a parent could say to their kid that might be anxious about a social interaction?
Um, um, I think many kids just avoid social situations and they don't want to play. Like, oh, I don't want to join them.
Right. Mm. So what could you say? Like, let's say they don't want to join and you notice that they stood next to a group of people. What could be a praise statement you could say if if they're standing next to a group of kids and that's already hard for them to do?
Yeah, so I will praise him. Oh, okay. You always stay away from them, but today you stay close to them. That's a big improvement.
Perfect. Thank you. Exactly, Kona. So saying, I'm so happy you got so close to them, that's a big improvement. That is rewarding attempts. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a reward of attempting whatever they need to do to get them closer to not avoiding. We have one other brave volunteer that can share something that they might say.
Well, hello.
Hello, yes.
Yeah. What if we reward them with like ice cream and say, well, we do this and then we go get ice cream. Is that a good way or would you?
That's a great question. So that's a first then statement. That helps with compliance, but it doesn't help with reinforcing their attempting or whatnot. Now, if they were anxious to go to the ice cream store, and let's say they went to the counter and they ordered, what could you say as a praise statement if they ordered their own ice cream and that was hard for them to do? Jenny, yes, that's good. I'm so proud of you for trying to stand a little closer to your classmate. That would be a good one. I see we have some brave people in the chat. I thought that was really great that you waved hello to that friend from your class. Thank you, Bondi. That was awesome. So yeah, so those are all some good examples. So essentially, just saying that you're proud, that you're happy, that you liked any of those opening sentences, and then naming the behavior that you saw that was not avoidance is a very easy praise strategy to use to help them get closer, well, further away from avoidance, to reduce the anxiety. And thank you, Fiona, for letting me have you go first. I appreciate it. We can go to the next slide.
Okay.
So there are a variety of different interventions that can be really helpful to reduce social anxiety. One of the oldest interventions around is essentially cognitive behavioral therapy is very much used to treat um, social anxiety. Essentially, cognitive behavioral therapy looks at how your thoughts, behaviors, and feelings all interact with each other, and they work on changing either your thoughts, behaviors, or feelings to have the other two things fall in line as well. And then for children, we have a play-based cognitive behavioral therapy model that can be adapted down. Like we take, the CBT that you learn to do with adults, and it gets transferred through play in order to do it for younger children. Well, yeah, and teens too. Social skills groups can really help with social anxiety, and Cogleap does offer a program called Move and Connect, and we're going to see a video clip about that in a moment. Move and Connect essentially works by helping recreate neural pathways in the brain, which would strengthen the non-avoidance skills. Exposure-based therapy, usually called exposure with response prevention, or systematic desensitization, are two exposure-based therapies. I'm going to type those into the chat really fast. Desensitization Or, because I know I said lots of big words, and then maybe the first time you guys are hearing them. So this is exposure, response, prevention. So I just threw that in the chat so you guys can think of those words. But those are the most popular exposure-based therapy for social anxiety. And then there's a variety of parent coaching programs. There's parent coaching through ABA, there's parent coaching through mental health, there's parent coaching groups like Triple P Parenting. You can very easily go on Google and search parent coaching programs and get a plethora of them. The main component of any of these interventions is that all of these approaches are going to teach skills and build confidence. And those are two things that individuals with social anxiety need. They need to learn the skills they need to do, and that they feel confident when they're doing those skills. So in a social skills group, we get a lot of practicing of social interactions, which is great. They get to learn conversation skills. By default, they're not isolated because they're in a group setting. So then also get to work on pure confidence. What's great about a group is your kid may not always be the person that's having the most trouble that day. So they get to also be good at something and see, oh, I'm good at turn taking and Sally's better at conversations. And then they can learn together and they can both showcase their skills that they're good at, and they can both then learn from each other for things they're not good at. It always feels good when you're in a group and you realize that you're not the only one that's struggling with something. So a group is a really great way to help work on social anxiety. And then all the groups pretty much include the same type of teaching strategies. They all include role playing, they all include games, and there's always going to be guided peer interaction. There's always going to be a facilitator or multiple facilitators guiding the peers through what they need to do in order to be socially successful. So now we're going to go to YouTube and we're going to watch a short video about Cogleap's Move and Connect program. We can't hear it, Fiona.
Oh. Can't hear it?
Our Move and Connect program
Now we can.
helps children
Okay.
to build their focus, social skills, and confidence through fun group activities. We mix movements and then teamwork games to help children learn how to connect and cooperate.
Go ask your partner. So you guys have to work together. You're gonna slow down for your partner.
With HFS Power Play, children will improve their attention, coordination, and emotional regulation to help them learn and grow with confidence. Our trainers have a lot of experience to work with children who need extra supports with learning and emotions.
Hey, this is fun. Can I? Good. And then you have to wait. My name is Yuna. I like dogs. And then today we're gonna learn how to work as a team. So you guys have to work together to build a house together. All right? Okay, go. Go, Lucas. So fun, right? So fun. I like it.
Thank you, Fiona. So as you can see, there was a lot of playful interactions within the Move and Connect program that really helps build confidence and build skills. You saw kids that were probably around the age of 5, but we have a Move and Connect program essentially from that age all the way up to later teens. And then the activities change appropriately for like their development. That's for their chronological age. So we teach them using the appropriate play and game activities for their age. So when do we seek professional help? So always, if you're getting reports from school that anxiety is interfering with school, that is where most kids are most of the day. And this is oftentimes where social anxiety presents itself the most. So if the teachers are starting to say, you know, little Johnny or little Sally is having a hard time at school because they're not interacting with other kids, that's not the time to brush it off. Like the teacher has seen hundreds, maybe thousands of children over the year. And they see, your kid for 6 hours a day. I guess if they're school half day, like 3, but they see your kid for a significant amount of time during the day. So if any anxiety interferes with school, you definitely want to reach out for professional help. If you start to see patterns in refusal of social activities, that's another red flag to seek professional help. Again, a kid that doesn't want to go to something one time, that's not like, don't get an alarm, have sound alarm for that. But if they have repeatedly not wanting to do social activities, that's definitely a time to reach out to get some help. Physical complaints. If kids are starting to complain about being physically ill, that is something. Anxiety can manifest physically. Our mind controls our body. So if we're feeling very anxious over things, we could get stomach aches and headaches. We can have trouble sleeping. That can cause like our muscles to hurt and our body to ache. So if kids are starting to complain about physical ailments or illnesses, you definitely want to seek professional help for that. For physical stuff, go to a medical doctor first. Make sure it's not a medical reason they're feeling those things. And if there's no medical reason to feel those things, then you want to go to a mental health practitioner. And then if you notice anxiety getting worse, again, sometimes it's normal to feel a little bit of anxiety every now and then. Everyone feels anxiety, like inside out, like anxiety is one of the feelings because we all feel it. But if it gets worse over time, that is definitely where you want to be more mindful and get it treated. And the earlier you intervene will always lead to better outcomes. So anxiety is treatable and it's easiest to treat when it first starts. The longer we wait, the harder it is to treat because there's just more of that avoidance behavior that has built up and got reinforced. All right, so what can you do right now? So you can do what I like to call a small bravery challenge, and that should say each week. The picture's cutting off WEEK, but so each week, one small little challenge. What's one little step your kid can do each week to help them not to feel so anxious? And stick with it. Stick with one challenge. And maybe you can give your kid 2 or 3 options and let them pick the one that's the least scary to them. And then lots of praise for doing it. Focus on praising the effort instead of the outcomes, using those brave statements that we practiced a little bit earlier, and then practice social scenarios at home. If you know your kid gets a little bit anxious in social situations, practicing what to do beforehand is really great. And by beforehand, we're talking like 30 minutes before it's about to happen, not the day before, not 4 days before. That's way too much time. Really, right before, as soon as possible, like 30 minutes before would be ideal. And that way they can practice what to do in those situations. Consistency is more important than intensity. None of these things should be terribly long and stressful for your child, but it should be repeated and done often because that's going to help. That's going to get you further than grueling intense sessions that your kid can't manage. And you don't want your kid to avoid wanting to do the practice. So in closing, before we get to some questions, essentially social anxiety is common and treatable. It's one of the easier mental health disorders to treat, to be honest with you. With support, children learn to build their confidence, they learn to develop friendships, and they can learn resilience. And any small step you take today can help create big confidence tomorrow. And hopefully joy will take back over the motherboard of the brain instead of anxiety. So I went through, we got some questions from hopefully some of you that are in the audience today. So I'm going to go through the next couple of minutes to do my best to answer them. The first one, how do I help my son process feelings of hurt when a peer pushes a button? I'd like for him to overcome his sadness, resolve the conflict, and continue to play and have fun. So when a kid feels hurt, the best thing to do is to validate their feelings. So say things like, oh, I saw that, you got upset today when someone said that you were not running as fast as like they were running. And have them talk about why that hurts their feelings. I think a common mistake is that we feel like if we don't talk about the feelings go away. We need to talk about the feelings in order to get a clear understanding and help them feel more successful about that. If you validate their feelings, they will learn that they can push through, and that will help them overcome their sadness. And then eventually, once they acknowledge that all feelings are fine, and they start to feel okay speaking about being hurt, they'll be able to speak up to resolve the conflict. Because in order to resolve the conflict, you have to be willing to say things like, "You hurt my feelings, and this is what I need to do better." So it all starts with validating the feeling, getting comfortable with that, and then moving to the next two steps. The second question is, how can family members help children integrate in society? How can they teach social skills? What activities can they suggest? So I think I went through this in the talk, but essentially any family member can say positive statements that the kid is doing, so they can all praise outcome. That's super easy for anyone to do. So let your significant family members know whenever you see little Johnny interacting or trying to interact with peers, like give them praise for that. That's a real easy way to get them involved. That is easy to teach. You could ask them to model what needs to be done in terms of social skills. That's it. So if you know that they want to play if they want to play a board game, instead of expecting the kid to figure out how to play the board game, have them sit down and go and model what to do in those situations. For activities, I would say anything your kid likes that you can turn into a social activity would be great. So for example, if your kid loves to build Legos, maybe inviting a peer over to do a preferred activity with them like Legos would get you further than making your kid do an activity he doesn't like. So whenever you're trying to work on anxiety, if you can stay with activities your child enjoys, you'll get further with that. The third one, how to manage anxiety, emotions, and social conversations. So essentially, you need to help teach coping skills to manage the anxiety. So the deep breathing, the positive statements, rehearsal, role play out what to do in those situations. And then for social conversations, practicing conversations back and forth really is the real way to manage social conversations, is just to practice them. If you do any like children's books, you can at the end of the book, you can always pretend to be two of the characters in the story and have them have a conversation to kind of continue the story, like what might happen next. And you can role play out what those characters would say. You just spent 20 minutes reading a book, or maybe I guess kids' stories are shorter, maybe 10 minutes. You already have this well-developed characters in the story. Pick two of them and say, if they hung out, what would they talk about? So that way your kid was primed with what to do, and then you practice the back and forth. How can you get your child to understand that making friends is a good thing and what a real friend is, helping them with pushing? Okay. So I think the best way to get your kid to understand that friends are good is to be honest that that's part of normal, typical development. And maybe even point out to your child that you have friends. You know, I know sometimes a lot of families will call their good friends like aunt and uncle in our culture. So maybe say, you know, Aunt so-and-so isn't really an aunt, but she's a really good friend of mine. So that's why we call her, you know, Aunt so-and-so. And mommy and daddy, we love hanging out with our friends. Like, you know, daddy goes and sees his friends a couple days a week, and mommy goes out to see her friends. And that's something that like all humans do. If you have an older child, you can point out how your older child looks forward to seeing their friends. So you essentially just point out and make it normal that having friends is a good thing. And you use real life examples that they would understand. You can even point out friends from TV shows. I know Bluey's a very popular show for really young kids, and Bluey goes to school and talks about hanging out with her friends. So you can kind of point out the normalcy of friendships. What is that? What a real friend is. So when they have positive interactions with individuals, I would point out those positive interactions and label the good friend behaviors. So and so is a good friend because they're very nice when they play with you today. And you just kind of point out the positive interactions that are happening to help them know what a real friend is. What is a healthy amount of pushing your child in social situations? So that is hard to say without having more specific examples, but I would say that if you push your child, make sure you push them when they have a coping skill to do to regulate them to feel better. And if what you're doing is pushing is making them feel worse, I would stop. If you only do a little bit of pushing, you feel like, and your child immediately breaks down and gets totally dysregulated, that's something you need professional help with. And then how do I get my child to recognize his feelings and control his outbursts? So I love doing like a feelings wheel with kids. That's really easy. If you Google feelings wheel and put in your child's age, there's many a therapist that have put it all over the internet. It looks like a circle, lots of different feelings, often color coded. And what you could do is you can have the child every day start to point out a different feeling that's going on and what something they did that day that feeling was exhibited on. And you can model that. You can say, I went to work today and I felt bored because, work was boring today. Nothing really could happen. Or I was really stressed at work because we had something really important to get done. So you can also model and use the feeling wheel to name feelings about what you did. Something really easy to do as we get a little bit older is something called high-low buffalo. What is your high of the day? And then how did that make you feel? What was your low of the day and how did it make you feel? And then what was your buffalo of the day? That's anything they want to share. And how did that make you feel? So working on feeling identification will increase feeling vocabulary. And then to control the information, control the outburst, essentially you need to teach coping skills would be the best way to control the outburst. So with that, that brings us to our time for today. Thank you for everyone that put in some questions. I hope that we answered a good amount of them. We had a couple overlapping the questions, so we picked ones that were a little bit more robust. I hope you all found this helpful. Fiona, I'll send it to you to sign off.
Thank you, Dr. Albert, for such an insightful discussion on how to help our kids to manage their social anxiety. I also learned a lot, especially the engaging moments regarding how to praise your child for those positive behaviors. I think I will praise my kids more to help him to join more and more social situations. I
Awesome.
hope
Thank
every
you.
parent here for the webinar have felt the same as me. And also I would like to introduce our Move and Connect trial class to you. So I believe Dr. Albert mentioned that we have the Move and Connect program that could greatly help with the social anxiety and help the kids to improve their social skills and build their confidence. And if you are interested in this program, you can scan this QR code for trial. And also you can book a free consultation if you're not so sure about this program and want to know more about it. You can book a free consultation with us. And on the right side is our contact information. So you can take a picture of this if you want to reach out to us. And we are more than happy to help you to support your child. And so today we have our second week of our social skills parent workshop. And the next Monday will be our next workshop for the kids aged more than 12. So if you're interested, you're also welcome to join. And I hope you can stay tuned, stay updated with our newsletter and events and our team. And I wish everyone have a great, wonderful evening. And we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Thank you. Have a great evening. Bye.